Evening everyone. It's Friday night and the Beermail stockpile just keeps growing, so I'm going to have to try and make a effort to get through some of it. I want to do a few video reviews. So this one is going to be for a beer, or maybe a couple of beers, from Jacko Jackson, who sent me an epic beer mail. First set of beers I've had from him. Such an epic beer mail, in fact, that it required instructions with it to tell me what to do. So yeah, it's just really a breakdown of all the different beers here and what's in them, which is actually really cool to get that. So it means that I can kind of talk about them with a little bit more information if I do actually review them. So yeah, thanks again, Jacko, for that. That's awesome. And I'm looking forward to trying these because there's a really good selection of beers. We've got a couple of sours in here. So a rhubarb and custard sour, a green tea and peach kettle sour. Whoops. A milk coffee stout, and the one that I'm going to drink right now, which is a rusty Pale Rye IPA, which is based on Kinnegar Brewing's Rust Bucket even IPA. So let's give it a go. Right, so the Rusty Pale Rye IPA coming in at 5.4%, which I think is what it says on the bottle, but it's kind of all rubbed off a little bit on there. In this beer we have 62% Maris, 25% rye, good chunk of rye malt in there, which I like. If you're going to do a rye beer or rye IPA, I think, you know, you really want to make sure that you can actually taste that element of it, and you certainly should be able to with a quarter of the grist being made up of malted rye. 4% wheat, 3 and a bit percent of dark crystal, and 2 and a bit percent of carahel, and then just some rice hulls presumably to make sure it mashed through, which is again a good idea if you're using a lot of rye, because that can be quite sticky, similar to kind of using a lot of oats or wheat. It can cause the mash to get a little bit thick and sticky, so rice hulls are definitely a good idea. And then hopping wise, we've got Magnum, Amarillo Gold and Citra in at 15 minutes, and more Amarillo and Citra dry hopping at about 12 days into the fermentation, fermented with Safale SO4 English ale yeast. So recipe already sounds good to me. I've never tried the original beer that this is based on, but I'm pretty certain that I've had Stephen Burton, Big Banana Brewing's clone version of this already. Can't really remember much about it, to be honest, but I'm sure that I've had a version of this before. So let's get it into the glass. I think Jacko was a little bit worried about the carbonation levels on this, because I think this might have been one of his first attempts at bottling off the keg into plastic bottles with a carbonation cap or something like that, possibly. But that doesn't seem to be a problem, because that has got streaming carbonation coming up the glass, and you can see there's a nice head on there. Didn't have to pour it in too aggressively to get a few bubbles on it. Nice sort of deep amber colour, bit hazy. I think Jacko was looking for a bit more clarity like the original on this, but no bother. Actually, I think he did a video where he compared it to the original himself, and it looks a lot clearer on that video anyway. So this was probably bottled a lot earlier on, but yeah, slight haze to it, but nothing off-putting. It's certainly not something that's going to trouble me. So on the nose, there's a little bit of sweet, kind of orangey citrus aroma, not massively pungent from the hops. And then there's the malt in there. I think you do get a little bit of spice on the nose, which could be the rye. But yeah, just a sort of general sort of sweet, biscuity malt thing with a little bit of spice, and then some orangey citrus. Quite subtle aromatics, but perfectly pleasant. Nothing off-putting at all there. So far, so good. You can definitely tell that's a rye beer, which I like. I'm quite a big fan of rye in beers, unlike some people. But yeah, straight away you get that sort of a little bit of a dry kind of spicy, yeah, kind of like a almost spicy cracker kind of finish I think you get with rye in beers when it's in a decent quantity. But there's some nice kind of sweet caramel toffee notes off of the dark crystal in there as well, and just a general kind of biscuitiness from the maris, which is nice. So the malt flavour on this is really good. I'm really enjoying that. As for the hops, it's quite a gentle hop flavour for an IPA. I don't know how much bitterness there is in the original, but it's fairly, it's not really soft bitterness, because there is a bit of bitterness there, but it's not massively, sort of, oh, this is a real strong kind of IPA level of bitterness in there. There's some orange. I think I'm probably, definitely getting that kind of slightly marmalade orange zest kind of thing from the Amarillo, and some softer fruit notes, maybe a bit of stone fruit from the Citra too. So I don't know how hoppy it's supposed to be, again based on the original. This is not what I would describe as a massively hoppy kind of IPA. If anything, it's kind of maybe leaning more towards almost like an English IPA in terms of the hop balance there. Bitterness is okay for an IPA. I guess based on the strength of it, maybe you can only go so far with the level of bittering, but it's quite nicely balanced. And yeah, for me, kind of the malt flavour coming off of this is the thing that I'm enjoying the most. There's a nice sort of subtle fruity aroma and taste from the Citra and Amarillo, but that's kind of sitting back a little bit, maybe more so than you might expect for a lot of IPAs that are around nowadays. But as a more kind of like English style IPA, but with the rye in it, which is the thing that makes it a bit different, I think the balance of it works quite well. I mean, obviously, if you were looking to up the hoppiness on this, I think with this particular recipe, I'd probably be tempted to put in. I don't think there's a Whirlpool edition in this, so I'd probably put in a Whirlpool edition as well. I'm not sure exactly how much was in the dry hop either, but obviously you could boost that up a little bit as well. The grist and everything is really nice and works quite well for me. Like I said, I'm a fan of rye beers though, so if I was making a rye IPA, I think my only change to the grist would maybe be to incorporate a little bit of crystal or Cara rye as well, because I think that's a really, really nice malt. Gives you a nice bit of colour as well, but also some good kind of sweet sort of toffee-ish flavours, but without being quite as cloying as some of the other caramel malts. So I've actually used it in a West Coast IPA that I've got on tap at the moment, which there will be a video on soon. So yeah, I quite like this actually. I'm enjoying this beer. Thank you very much, Jacko, for sending it. And yeah, I think it definitely ticks the boxes as a rye IPA, which is great for me. And yeah, well done. Very enjoyable. Cheers. I was going to leave it there and just do the one review, but when I read this again, the rhubarb and custard sour and the peach and green tea sours were really kind of tweaking my interest. So I thought I'd do one of those quickly now, and I've gone for the rhubarb and custard sour, which Jacko has called the Ruby Rock, coming in at 4.5%, slightly soured blonde ale with rhubarb and lactose additions, brewed with Voss quake yeast, however you want to say it. Sounds like he had a few issues when he was brewing this, because he's put down that it was not an enjoyable experience, and he's also put that he opened one the other day and it was a gusher. Okay, so there's a little bit of jeopardy with this one as well. I've got a bucket down here on the floor just in case, but we'll see how we go. In the recipe, we've got pale malt, pilsner, acid malt, Mandarina Bavaria hops, just a 15-minute addition of those, 250 grams of lactose, and a kilo of chopped rhubarb. So disclaimer, first of all, I am by no means an expert when it comes to sour beers. Well, it's not quite an explosive gusher, but it is just foaming up over the top. But you would normally have quite a high level of carbonation on a lot of sour beers. So That's not too bad. Anyway, as I was saying, I'm a bit, lacking in knowledge when it comes to sour beers because, I mean, I've never brewed one myself personally. I've participated in a group brew for a Berliner Weiss that we did for a competition with the home brew club at the local brew house and kitchen. I've never brewed one myself here or at the previous brewery. I don't dislike sours massively, but I don't massively go out my way to drink them either. So, I'll have them very occasionally. But yeah, I don't know really much about brewing them or drinking them for that matter. So yeah, I'm not very well qualified to do this review. However, I can look at that in the glass and say it looks pretty appealing to me. So almost crystal clear. Nice streaming carbonation in there. There's a few little bits of sediment floating around in the bottle here. It is bottle conditioned, so I guess that's obviously some of the sediment that's just popped up because of the high levels of carbonation. There's a nice light frothy cap on the top of it. And yeah, just looks pretty good in the glass. Now, let's just go back to this recipe a second. Doesn't say much about the sort of souring process. I don't know whether the acidulated malt, which is in this, which is 20% of the grist, is kind of the thing doing the souring. I mean, I would expect to contribute some sort of sourness to it. But I don't know, is that possible to do that just with acidulated malt? I'm sure you can obviously lower the pH with it. Yeah, it's brewed with Voss Cavaic yeast, so quike. And then we've got the 250 grams of lactose in there, which I guess is giving you the custard element because it's obviously milk sugar, so it's potentially going to give you a little bit of that sort of flavour. And then a kilo of the chopped rhubarb. The rhubarb I would expect to bring a little bit of tart sourness anyway on its own. So yeah, between that and the acid malt, I guess that's what we're looking for. So on the nose, do I get a bit of rhubarb? I'm certainly getting a little bit of something kind of tart and fruity on there. Yeah, I think you do get the rhubarb actually. There's a little bit kind of sweet malt and that kind of tart. It's almost like a kind of crumble, when you like get the aroma of a fruit crumble, which I guess for a rhubarb and custard sour is not a bad thing to be getting on the nose. Let's give it a taste. So it's very light. The high carbonation on this gives it a kind of spritzy sort of mouthfeel, very light kind of body to it because it's just sort of foaming up as you drink it. There's a very, very sort of gentle sourness to this. I don't think I'd necessarily sort of call this a sour beer as such, because I don't think it's quite sour enough. But for me, the sour beers that I enjoy very much at the low end of the scale in terms of sourness. So for my personal palate, that's probably a good thing. And there is rhubarb there. The custard side of things, there's a little bit of sweetness, but it's maybe not quite enough to really sort of be suggesting the custard flavour as much. But then again, if I was going to sort of compare the taste of this to something, it is definitely reminiscent to me of that kind of rhubarb and custard sweet flavour. So it does kind of taste a little bit like that, which a lot of the sour beers nowadays, they seem to be basing them on, kind of sweety flavours or kind of retro sweet flavours. It's a bit more subtle than a lot of those beers because I've tried a couple of those and they're a bit full on, but yeah, it's maybe not as full on as a lot of people would expect it to be for something that's called a sour beer in terms of the acidity of it. There's a nice subtle fruity flavour to it. The grist kind of just sits behind that, so it just gives you a little bit of background sort of sweetness. I don't really think that I'm getting much of the hops at all, but you wouldn't really expect that in a sour beer anyway. A little bit of sweetness from the lactose. Perhaps that could have gone up a little bit to give you a bit more of that sort of custard effect. But, aside from sort of maybe not quite hitting the mark as a classic sour beer, I guess, as an easy drinking kind of summer fruited ale. I think that's really, really nice. Maybe not the best drink for a cold spring evening in a garage, but if you had this served at a summer barbecue, I think people would go mental for it. So yeah, that's very nice. I am enjoying that. Probably better for me because it's not as sour as some people would like it to be for a rhubarb sour, but yeah, works for me. So yeah, cheers again, Jacko. And based on those two beers, I'm very much looking forward to the next two. So Jacko's doing some videos now as well, by the way, on YouTube. So go and check out his channel, Audley's Brew Company. I'll put a link up to that on the screen, and jump over there and give him a sub if you can. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
I'm the dude. So that's what you call me, you know? That or his dudeness or duder or, you know, El Duderino if you're not into the whole brevity thing.